Greetings, everyone. This is Weekly Wanderings for the week of February 6th, 2012. I have in front of you today one of my favorite CDs from my growing up years. I hope you can see it. It is called Free to Be, You and Me. Anybody out there remember this CD? Yep, this CD had some great songs and stories on it from people like Alan Alda and Rosie Greer, Harry Belafonte, Carol Channing, and of course, Mel Brooks. Yes, of History of the World. But it was put together by the one and only Marlo Thomas. And it's kind of a, I suppose, hippie type CD, or, it's a CD now. It was a record at the time. But I remember growing up listening to this and all the different stories that were on here and remembering about a place where you and me were free to be, you and me. I thought about that today. It was kind of an exciting day for those of us who do advocacy in the LGBT community, because today in California, a federal appeals court decided that Prop 8, which was something voted on in the state of California to ban same-sex marriage, that Prop 8 proposition was unconstitutional. It's an exciting day. It means, we hope, that marriages between our brothers and sisters in the LGBT community in California will be restored and new ones will be able to take place. But we also know that there will be resistance continued, and we suspect that this case will be taken all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And just as a side note, rest assured that people like me who believe in same-sex marriage will continue the fight no matter how far it goes or how high up in the courts it goes. But as I heard the news today, it got me to thinking about some of the fallout or some of the resistance and some of the resistors to same-sex marriage. And I started to think about a lesson, scripture that we read last week at our Wednesday night study. We're studying the book of James, which, by the way, is a phenomenal book for anybody who is a believer. I strongly encourage you to read it. It has some of my favorite scripture verses in it, things that I really need to remember, things like be slow to speak, slow to get angry, and quick to listen, something that I need to perhaps learn to do more often. Maybe you do as well. Also in James, we have another favorite of mine, one actually that our president quoted in his recent speech at the National Prayer Breakfast, that is about being doers of the word and not just hearers of the word. Also in the book of James, we have the idea that faith without works is dead, so that, in other words, how we act out our faith is very important as we go about our day. Also in James, we have the very important idea about controlling our tongue. And in fact, he challenges us to realize that controlling the tongue is not something that any of us really can do, how difficult that is, which is challenging. And then what we studied last week, where we ended our study last week, was in the book of James, the 4th chapter, verses 11 and 12, which I'd like to share to you tonight. And I'm thinking about in light of some of the dissenters or resistors of same-sex marriage, and really any other social issue that seems to be out there. So hear this from the book of James. Don't speak evil against each other, my dear brothers and sisters. If you criticize each other and condemn each other, then you are criticizing and condemning God's law. But you are not a judge who can decide whether the law is right or wrong. Your job is to obey it. God alone, who made the law, can rightly judge among us. He alone has the power to save or to destroy. So what right do you have to condemn your neighbor? One more time, I want to read 2 sentences. Your job is to obey the law, and so what right do you have to condemn your neighbor? You know, I know some people who are resistant over same-sex marriage or any other number of social issues where they appear anyway to be condemning their neighbor, would never ever say that they are condemning their neighbor. In fact, they would probably say they aren't judging their neighbor either. And I guess in some ways I'm judging them by saying that. But it's clear to me that when you see signs, placards that people are carrying that say God hates anyone, that there is certainly an element of judgment there. And I have to wonder when I see signs like that, where is the other part of the law for them? You know, when someone came to Jesus and said, what is the greatest of the commandments of Moses? And Jesus said, the great commandment, as we know it, to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, when I think about love, and especially love that comes from God, it is unconditional. It is a love that loves no matter what. It's a love that I hope I have for my children, my husband, my family, my friends, and yeah, even strangers I meet on the street. Well, some will argue, I can love someone, you know the old saying, love the sinner, hate the sin. It's one of my least favorite sayings, primarily because I defy anybody to tell me that they can have that capacity to do that. How many of you know people who have said that and can really say that they love the sinner? You know, it seems to me we're all sinners. Every single one of us, every single day, breaks God's law in one way or another. Think about it. Look at the 10 Commandments. Figure out what you've done today. Have you dishonored your mother or father? Have you coveted your neighbor's goods, or God forbid, your neighbor's wife or spouse? There are so many things that we do wrong every single day, and yet so many of us act all high and mighty, like we've got it all together, as we sit in judgment of our neighbors. I was really convicted as I read these verses again, because I do have a problem with judgmentalism. I recognize that. In fact, my kids are great at reminding me all the time. And I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I hope that my judgmentalism stays within myself and does not bear itself out in the way I treat other people. How does that work for you? Are you able to look at other people and remove judgment from them? Or do you find yourself judging people and treating them differently because of the judgments you've made? I want to challenge you this week to think about the balance, or the discord, really, the disconnect between the great commandment, which tells us from Jesus himself to love God and to love others, versus what James tells us, which is that no one should judge their neighbor, because it is for God alone to judge. Think about that this week. And then if you have time and you have interest, pull up a little song called Free to Be You and Me, and tell me if you, like me, would like to live in a country that's free to be, everyone is free to be, you and me. Yes, that's my Harley, my Great Dane, calling me, so I have to go now. I hope you all have a great week. God bless you, and remember, love your neighbor. Don't judge.